I know a lot of your faces and names from previous classes, and there's a couple people I actually know in person. And I actually initially created this class along with one of my best friends, Esther, who's not joining us tonight, but when you do download the handout, you'll see her name mentioned because most of the initial design of the handout is still from when we taught this class for the first time, something like 7 years ago. All right, and I'm going to paste the handout again because I see more names have come in. And then if people come in once I'm going and have images up, you know, if anybody needs the handout, you can just paste in the link. So I did initially design this as a youth and family class, but there's not really much in here that isn't appropriate to adults. And a matter of fact, a bunch of the illuminations I was looking at to find examples to show you of people playing games had adults and children interchangeably playing things like bowling, or there were even adults on hobby horses. So I had designed it for a youth and family class at Penzic initially, along with Esther. But really, most of these things are not age limited. Maybe rattles might be mostly for small people, but it really is designed as a class where I go into a couple different kinds of toys that are very medieval appropriate. Some of them are absolutely ancient, and I have some instructions in the handout on how you might make them. And then I also have a list at the end of things that you really don't even need to make. And some of the ones that you can make, you can also just buy them. They're toys that are still available, or, you know, all you need for hopscotch is a stick of chalk and a rock or something to throw. So there are a lot of things that haven't changed over hundreds and thousands of years. So I'm going to throw up some images. We'll see if it'll let me do this and still occasionally look at my handout. So share screen, child's play, turn it to a slideshow. All right, so I started out my slideshow with one of my favorite paintings of all time, which is Bruegel the Elder's Children's Games. That's a 16th century painting that has almost entirely children. There are a few adult figures scattered throughout the painting, but it is largely just what kind of games did children play. And there is an entire slim book that I have at the end of the handout that is nothing but cataloging all of the different games that you can see in the painting, and all the different ways of playing that the children are engaged in. And some of them look awfully familiar. There are kids wrestling. There are kids playing leapfrog. There's kids swimming off in the background. So a lot of what kids did, you know, back in the 1500s isn't really that different than what kids do when they're playing without electronics today. And I have done entire youth activity days where all I have done is set up different stations with the games that are shown, and a couple stations where you can make things to play games that are shown. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's bowling, there's knuckle bones. If you look up in the building that's sort of at the center top, I'm showing this to you now because I don't have a good image later, you see there are kids hanging out of some of the windows. And on one of those windows, there's this long strip coming out of the window. That's a ribbon stick that I'll talk about later, where it's a long ribbon tied to a stick, like those gymnastics ribbons that you might see. But this is my absolute favorite painting to bring up whenever I'm talking about kids, toys, and games. And I highly recommend you take a look at it. There are websites also that catalog every activity that they can identify in here. And you will see a number of the examples I have later in the class. You'll actually see that I've given you a detailed shot of a portion of the painting so that you can see more closely what they're doing. All right. So the first thing I have is a medieval toy that you can easily make is balls. Balls go back to ancient times. People have always played with little round objects to toss or throw or roll along the ground. So to give you an idea, I've given you two images of these are balls from later in SCA period. Apparently, they did some excavations in a church in Leicestershire and found a stairwell that was filled with children's toys. And all these toys are dated from about 1570 to 1630. So that set of two balls where one, the piece is taken off so you can see the inside. Those are from the church. And then the other one, it is specifically made to be a tennis ball. And I had to show you a picture because it's a leather ball and it's stuffed with dog hair compressed down to make the core of it. So there are lots of tutorials online on how to stitch together a leather ball in multiple sections that as long as you have the ability to do very basic sewing, you can sew together a leather ball. But yeah, I had to show you the dog hair because that was just too cool. They know that this is specifically a tennis ball. They actually found it at Westminster. And so it was a royal tennis ball. And then again, I just grabbed two more images. The one that's sort of orangey red is a ball that's made from pottery. And then it's covered in a red fabric. And then I pulled out the Ashwood bowling ball because we'll roll into, I saw what I did there. We'll roll into bowling after this. It is a Ashwood bowling ball. And you can see it isn't actually perfectly round. It is actually shaped so that it has a specific direction in which it's supposed to spin. So again, I mean, balls go back. You can make a ball out of felted wool. You can actually do it with nothing but wool. So very hot water and soap and wool, and you just keep working it so the fibers compress and compress and compress together. It is way easier if you start with something in the middle, like maybe a small wooden ball, or if you want something that your cats are going to steal from you, you can start with like a jingle bell or something. But something that is very easy to make for yourself or buy. I'm going to pull up the handout right now and look real quick just because I don't always remember what I have in here. So I mentioned the fold. I have been told, though I have not tried it, that actually you can wrap yarn very, very tightly and make a reasonable medieval ball. If you know someone who does woodworking, you could certainly learn to turn or carve a wooden ball. So balls, of course, logically run right into then, and I just grouped these all together. Bowls, bowling, or Skittles. So, go back to the slideshow format. So I've given you just some images of bowling. The basic idea is that you are rolling a ball of some kind along the ground. The difference between just your ball toy and your Skittles or bowling toy is you need something to knock down. or a goal that you're all trying to roll towards, and see who can roll the ball the farthest or roll the closest to a goal, which is what we do in modern bocce. Um, you can see the little boys on the image towards the top. They seem to have like little tower things that they are going to get to knocking over just as soon as they stop bickering with each other and kind of wrestling. And for reasons I'll never understand, this image of them bowling is underneath a depiction of the Massacre of the Innocents. So sorry about the bloody baby at the top, but they're bowling underneath. And then you can see these are actually supposed to be adult men in the image underneath. They're not knocking over any sort of pin or anything, but you can see they're all rolling balls in some sort of a direction, probably to a goal. You can make the pins out of whatever. Honestly, you could just get some nice pieces of wood that'll just stand up. You don't have to go to any great effort to easily make a bowling toy. A series of things that you can set up and try to knock over. Here's another nice picture of boys bowling. We actually, in our local group, when we're obviously not all home from COVID, we actually have a bocce tournament at one of our summer events every year that's open to all ages. And it's real easy to just set up a bowling green. You know, we put a border around it so that people don't run through the middle of the bowling green, and then at a certain time, people get together and they play bocce. It's a lot of fun, and everybody enjoys it. The little kids love it. We can even usually get the teenagers to play, even though they don't think many of the things we're doing are cool right now. And adults have fun with it. So unfortunately, this is one of the ones where I do not have a good picture of an artifact. So the next thing I had listed in my handout is a cup and ball game. So this is a game that we all tried at least once when we were children, where you have a cup, like is pictured here so here is the cup. You have some sort of a dowel rod coming out of it, and then you have a ball that is on a string that you are trying to move and toss this bead or ball up in such a way that you catch it in the cup. I did find a French name earlier for them that made it a little easier to find some in museums, but I can't find a medieval one right now. But they are supposed to have been invented in about the 1400s. And you can easily recreate what I am picturing right here with a dowel rod, a wood component. They sell at the craft store usually as a candle holder, and a wooden bead and some twine. They go together really easily. You don't even necessarily have to use glue to get the dowel rod and the cup holder to hold together, because if you get the right fit, they actually will fit almost perfectly smoothly. And we've made these a lot, and the real thing you have to spend time on is getting the right amount of string to allow you to catch that bead. And you make these and you give them to people, and then you see people running around the rest of the day trying to make it work. And there is actually a cup and ball somewhere in the mid-realm royalty supplies, because every once in a while the crown will hand it off to somebody and they'll have to play with it in court until they actually manage to catch the ball in the cup, and then they're allowed to pass it off. I've seen it come out twice. All right, so explained how to make the cup and ball toy. Let's get into one that could be a class all by itself. And I kind of lumped some things together here. because I wanted to get to, I listed them as poppets. So dolls, puppets, figurines. Dolls and figurines are ancient and they're made out of everything. There are examples of dolls out of cloth. I'll show you some that are carved out of bone. There are ones that are made out of clay. There are cast dolls that are pewter. So whatever technologies your particular culture had, they probably made toys or figures out of it. This particular one, and I meant to get her a partner on the other side, I didn't get it. This is a linen rag doll from Roman Egypt. So they estimate it's about 1st to 5th century. It's in the British Museum. And she is actually pretty simply made. She's stuffed with rags and papyrus. And you can see that a lot of her, she's really just like 2 pieces. So she's got a leg. She goes up to the head. She's got a leg. And then there's a second piece of fabric that forms the arms here. And it's twisted around in a certain way. I actually know a lady from the mid-realm who got a look at multiple pictures of this and actually did a recreation doll and then dressed it up because, you know, you make this little doll, you stuff the doll, which is something that even a very small child can do, is help stuff the doll and stitch it up. And then you can make little clothes for it. Most of the dolls also could be dressed. And you figure for a Roman doll, she just put a little peplos on her. So it was really just 2 pieces of fabric, and she took a piece of trim and made a belt. And then she gave it a lot of hair because it was fun with a lot of hair. But you can see this is an easy type of doll to make, and rag dolls are pretty universal. There's always going to be eventually bits of clothing that are no longer viable for anything else except rags, and they can easily be turned into a doll. Up here, there's this little bump sticking out, and it's hard to see even on this picture. That's actually a little glass bead. So probably she was decorated as well. And again, once you make the doll, then you can add decorations by sewing on little beads or little pieces of fabric or making simple little embroidery stitches to give her a face or give her hair or whatever else you would want to do with the doll. So here I had mentioned dolls made of bone. So these are carved basically doll bodies and faces that you could then dress. These are all made of bone, and I discovered this, the Benaki Museum has a whole section that is just on children's toys and games. And these are some carved dolls from their collection. So again, you want to try carving? Carve out of, maybe not bone to start, but you could always carve them out of wood. If you do decide to carve them out of bone, talk to your butcher, because apparently you can get bones to carve pretty easily. I know somebody who did that for another project. But yeah, they're pretty simple bodies, and then just cute little faces and headdresses. And then there are also depictions in portraits of children holding dolls. So you can see that this second daughter over here is holding a little fashion doll. And it looks like the fashion doll is basically dressed in a miniature version of, you know, clothing of the period. And we know that they had fashion dolls moving into the Renaissance that would be dressed up, you know, like an adult would be. Another one So Arabella Stewart's portrait, you can see she has a little fashion doll dressed up in Elizabethan clothing. In particular, and then over here, this is one of these detail shots that I mentioned I'd show you from children's games. You can see these dolls seem to be a little simpler. Looks like maybe a wooden head, and then you can't quite tell what the body is. But you can see they've got little clothes on them that look almost just like the clothes that the girls are wearing. You know, something that you could make with your scraps of fabric. It does look like at least one of them over in the corner has some sort of a face painted on. And then it looks like there's even a little piece of doll furniture. Almost all the doll furniture that they've found in the medieval and Renaissance periods are cradles and beds. Doll houses just start happening right at about 1600. But you certainly have little dolls that are dressed, and they might have a bed to sleep in. I don't have any really good pictures of it. There also are baby dolls. There is at least one painting where a little girl is holding a baby doll, but even blown up on the screen like this for you, it was going to be like that small. It wasn't anything I could show you nicely. Here we have a doll maker. You can see that he's carving little wooden dolls. And I don't know why he drops them on the floor when he's done. That's a different question for all of us. But again, you know, it's not a complicated shape. We've made little peg dolls. You know, if you don't want to try the carving, the little clothespin pegs make a great base to make a little peg doll. And then you can paint it and you can make little clothes for it and have a very medieval looking toy to play with at events. For those of you who know Her Ladyship Sahilder, who's our Kingdom Minister of Youth in the middle right now, she actually makes these little peg dolls of specific people and gifts them to them. So it's a great little conversation starter and sort of a research interest thing to say, look, here's a very period looking doll, and oh, I made one of you to give to you that you can have. And I included this just because of it being an image from the English contact on the North American continent. When the English came to North America, they brought their dolls, and there's actually more than one version of a Native American girl playing with a doll that is clearly an European style fashion doll. Excuse me. And here's two more. So here, there aren't a lot, but there actually is a surviving fashion doll from just about 1600 in the Swedish Royal Armory that I have pictured here for you. And you can see how much fun you could have with the project of making it. Regardless of your age, you can see that it's a wooden face. And then over time, they've added beaded decorations and with bead and wire in the hair. She's got a full dress. She's actually got a little muff that her hands are in. But again, it's made with scraps like you would expect of a doll. And I'm going to just I see I've got a couple more chats. Here we go. So Shazada commented that they had a craft day in elementary school where they made peg and old style wooden clothespin dolls. And they've created little clothes for them to represent the various heritages. Yeah. And she said they did it while they were studying very early colonial America, which is absolutely appropriate for that. Oh, it helps if I click on the right side. For those of you cheering for the TA in the background, I have been joined by the fuzzy TA on my shoulder. And then I had to include this one. So beside the fashion doll, let's say you want to learn about casting. This is a hollow pewter doll that they found, I believe, along the Thames. That's in the Museum of London. So she's 16th century. And again, pewter was a thing they were doing that you have a lot of in that period. And so one of the things we cast in pewter is we cast little dolls to play with. I think this would be a fun project for people to try, because you'd learn about carving, learn about the fashion, and then at the end, you could cast your doll. Yeah, right?
Hey, Elizabeth, is she
Yeah.
hollow all the way through up? I'm assuming they cast her upside down, and the most likely thing would be have a cavity where the gown is. But is she hollow all the way up? Because she's kind of got a bigger head than body. Is she hollow all the way up to the top, to her head?
It's not totally clear based on what they have on the Museum of London's page if she's hollow all the way through. It does look, the most you can see is it appears she's still hollow at the neck, but I can't quite tell if past that point it becomes solid.
Could she possibly have been a finger puppet?
Theoretically, yeah, because if she's hollow, then she's open like that. And you can see the one bit of damage is she's lost the base. So you can't tell exactly how it was finished at the bottom.
See, I'm thinking like to go that far, have a cavity go that far up, you'd have to have a 3-part mold essentially to do that without making it hugely difficult on yourself to try to carve all that.
I would think, yeah, it's probably going to be a multi-part mold. And the thing is, she kind of goes with something that I just added into the handout recently. Hi, cat. Okay, now the cat is on my arms and should leave you guys alone. There are actually a number of little pewter toys that you find in this sort of 14, 15, 16, going in the 1600s, where they're like little pewter pots and little pewter cauldrons that are specifically made as toys. So there was an industry for it.
That's got quite a bit of nice detail on the gowns and the arm and stuff. I mean, pretty detailed work.
Yeah. There's one I'll show you a couple slides from now. That's a pewter soldier on horseback. So there was an industry for these toys by the end of period. All right, and I just started to throw in puppets here, and part of the reason I was excited is because I managed to find a nice non-European puppet display here. So I want to get more into puppets. Problem is we don't have a lot on what the puppets necessarily looked like. They're not depicted in a lot of places. But this is actually, the art is called translates to a children's puppet show. And you can see the puppeteer, and it looks like he's got basically like marionettes. So he has a few of them hanging here. And then he has the one that he's currently using to perform down there. And similarly, you'd need the puppet, but then you'd need to dress it. So again, things you can make. There actually was a reference in some of the things I found that some of the very late European dolls are called composition dolls. And what they mean by that is they're made with a bunch of different materials mashed together. And they said that even though it's modern, paper mache is actually a reasonable facsimile of what that composition material would have been, minus the arsenic, which you don't want in your modern doll anyway. So yeah, I thought we should probably avoid the arsenic for everyone's safety. And see, this is what I mean by we don't have a lot on the puppets in general. So this is a depiction of a medieval puppet show in an illuminated manuscript. We have the audience here. We have a stage with some sort of a curtain. And then we have a very simple, basically 2 towers and an arch over them that you could have a little curtain if you wanted. And there's another version of this I've seen that's very similar that also has the same arrangement of arch, 2 tower-like things, and then a cloth hanging down from a table. So you can see how that wouldn't be that hard to make if you wanted to do a puppet show at an event. I always thought it'd be really cool to have a like traveling puppet company. But you know, that's on my list of projects I haven't gotten to yet. But it would be a lot of fun. And then here, moving into figures rather than necessarily just dolls. This is one of my earliest examples in here. This is a carved wooden horse. And there are multiple examples of little carved horses and things from the Norse. And in the handout, there's actually a link to a very step-by-step set of instructions someone did on how to carve a horse like this. And it was so well done, I didn't need to duplicate it. If you want to learn, you can use that link and go find it. And then this is what I was referring to. This is a cast pewter knight on horseback. And again, yeah, this is a complex piece. But this is a little, and there are multiple versions of these little play knights that you could do things with. There are also other animals. I'm still working on getting some of the earlier artifacts into my handout, because a lot of the images I had initially were pretty focused on later medieval and Renaissance, but there are a lot of those toys do go back further. The cat is going to sleep on me.
Hey, Elizabeth, do you know
Yes.
how tall the little soldier, the pewter soldier is? Is it, you know, like D&D miniatures, or is it like much bigger than that, more like G.I. Joe size guys?
I can go find it. I want to
No,
say,
I'll go look
well,
it up.
yeah, but look
I was
on the
just curious if
Museum
you
of
knew.
London page. I want to say it's on the smaller side. But yeah, you can find these guys on the Museum of London page, and their stuff's just a lot of fun to look at, period. So, hobby horses. Hobby horses are fun. You can make a hobby horse with a stick and a sock, which is always my recommendation when you're starting out. Stuff the sock, secure it around the stick, and go for a ride. There is nothing like making some hobby horses, and then you could do what Hilder has done at It Takes My Child to Raise a Village, and you set up a little course, an equestrian course, and you can run the equestrian course with your hobby horse. They actually did that, and I didn't get to see it. They actually did that at SCA 50 year. They let the kids run the equestrian games with hobby horses. And then they had made the hobby horses for them, and then the kids got to keep the hobby horses. It was a huge hit. You saw kids the rest of the weekend running around with their hobby horses. Because really, who doesn't? And there'll be more hobby horses later in the presentation, because there is an accompanying toy you can make to go with your hobby horse that is what I call a windmill lance that we'll get to in a bit. So again, get some socks. People always have extra socks. And get some thicker dowel rods or some old handles or whatever people are willing to give to you. And you have a hobby horse and you can make it as plain or as fancy as you want. I've actually run into a young lady, not in the SCA. She was about 12 and her mom and her grandmother always did craft shows and she wanted to do something. So she began making hobby horses and selling them at craft shows. And she was selling more than her mother and her grandmother were because she was making all these cute little hobby horses with, you know, yarn manes and little reins, and everybody wanted to buy them for the kids for Christmas. So, knuckle bones. Basically a version, you can play a lot of games with knuckle bones that you can play with dice. This is one of the toys I have that does go all the way back to the Roman Empire. You don't actually have to have real knuckles of sheep or goats to play with knuckle bones, because most of the examples I have images of are actually glass. So they weren't using real knuckle bones either. This one, it is very worn, but this is actually glass underneath. These are Roman. And then these, talking about the wide appeal of knuckle bones, these are actually from that church hoard of toys they found. So knuckle bones from 1,500 years later. Their kids are still playing with knuckle bones. And I am actually terrible at knuckle bones, but you can find lots of instructions online or anywhere that will tell you basically how to read them and how to, what side is what, so that when you're rolling these, like you would roll dice, you can then see what you are, you know, basically who's scoring the highest. Sometimes I'm really good at the toy and not at the game part. Here, these are more knuckle bones. These are all at Johns Hopkins. And except for this one dead center that's a copper alloy, these are all glass as well. I've actually heard one of the easiest things probably to do to make knuckle bones is you can make them out of clay. And you could easily grab yourself some self-drying clay and form knuckle bones or dice or whatever you wanted to be able to roll. You can do it for a score. You know, it could be a betting game. My favorite thing to bet when I am betting at SCA events so that we don't run into trouble with money is Starburst candies, because they don't melt in the hot weather. And when I do demos with kids and I'm demonstrating any sort of game that might have been a gambling game in period, most kids will be willing to play for Starburst and try it out. So here you can see a pair of girls in the Bruegel painting who are actually playing with knuckle bones. Like I said, they might do it as betting. They might also play it like you would play jacks, where the idea would be to bounce a ball and try to pick up a certain number of knuckle bones while the ball is bouncing. So lots of fun, not a hard thing to find, and a game that I don't know how many kids, you know, say Sophia's kids' age know jacks, but I knew what jacks was when I was a kid, even if I was terrible at it. Marbles. So I would not have predicted that I could say this, but marbles was incredibly popular when I played it with the kids at Mid-Realm 50 celebration. They loved it. They could not get over how cool marbles were. So marbles are not an expensive thing to go out and buy, but you can also make marbles out of clay. So the first examples up here, oop, bumped something. First examples up here, these are glass. These are all from the same museum, but these are glass marbles that are dated to first and second or third century in Rome. And then but these ones on the bottom are clay marbles from Egypt. And I think we all remember playing with Play-Doh as a kid, where you would roll the Play-Doh in such a way to make it as round as possible. And you could easily do that with self-drying clay and end up with, once it dried, marbles to play with. And there are a ton of sets of rules online where you can find marbles, and there are a number of marbles games that you can recreate very easily. There's a version where you're basically trying to get it through doors in a box or something that's easy to make. You want to play marbles, betting marbles type things where it's, can you get them in the circle or out of the circle? All you need is a piece of chalk and your marbles. These are easy, and I had no idea how popular it would be. I had kids who wanted to play marbles for hours. Stilts. I have to go to the handout for this one. So take a look. I get 2 images of stilts for you here. There are also stilts in Bruegel's children's games painting. And I did not develop the technique for making the stilts that is in my handout because I had Antoinette for that. So Dame Antoinette from the Mid-Realm actually goes in. I basically listed her instructions for making the stilts that she had used to make stilts at Penzic. And I'm not going to read it out loud to you because you can read it, but it could be done with some very simple lumber to pick up. And what they did is they pre-cut the lumber and sanded down any major splinters or anything from it. And then they had the tools available so that the kids could actually put them together and learn how to make the stilts when they did this at Penzic. All right. Sophia said, oh boy, the stilts got her children's attention. Liability waivers. Hey, but it's a lot of fun. And the coolest thing about doing youth activities that I've found at a multi-day event like Penzic or Golf Wars or somewhere where you're going to see people again is seeing kids go by playing with the toys they made with you. I've seen that with hobby horses. I've seen that with ribbon sticks. I haven't personally seen it with stilts, but I'm sure I would. To know that not only did they come and enjoy it, making it with you, but they're actually using it to play with. Yes. Thank you, Heather. And the pewter knight toy figure Breesy just looked up was 1300 to early 1400s. Yeah, I think the knights, I've seen examples of the knights before I've seen the dolls. So you can make stilts. There is one that I don't have pictured in here that I want to mention for a moment, and it's a throwing toy. It's called a fit, and it is so much fun to make. So what you need for a fit is you need some old scrap fabric. I tend to use beans, but you can use beans or rice, and you basically put them in the center of a piece of fabric, and then you fold the fabric over them to make a ball. And then you tie off the fabric underneath that ball. And so what you have is you have a piece of fabric. So you have wrapped around a piece of rice, and then you have a tail coming off of it. And it is a throwing toy, so you can actually throw a fit. And because they have that fabric tail of the excess fabric from what isn't wrapped around the rice or the beans, they throw even better than a regular ball. So again, it's something you can, buy the beans or have somebody donate old beans they're not using anymore, ask for some scraps of fabric, and use some ribbon. So if you don't want the beans to go anywhere, I put a rubber band around it and then I cover the rubber band with a ribbon, because if you're playing inside, you don't want the rice or beans, thrown all over the place. But it's a perfectly nice toy. It's lots of fun to play with, and it's very inexpensive to make. And if it breaks, if the fabric finally rips or the ribbon comes untied, it's cheap to make a new one. And I like the fact that you can tell people you're going to go throw a fit now. So tops. So I have example for you from Bruegel's Children's Games of boys playing with tops. And then I actually have some pieces of tops that were found in that toy hoard. I have never figured out how to actually make the string tops where you use the string to pull and it makes them spin faster. So I can't tell you about making those, but you can find wood findings at a craft store that make a reasonable top and then stick a little dowel rod or something in it and make a little spinning top that you can decorate. Tops are also not expensive to go find. They always have them in the little bins of cheap toys. You'll always find tops. And they're a lot of fun to play with. We're all actually 5 deep down. You just have to find it. So I actually have this image in here primarily for the little girl here at the bottom. And you can see that she has a form of top in her hand. This is what this could be a top, this could be a tea totem. The closest thing I can give you to a tea totem, you see it has more defined sides to it. It's like a bedding or a gaming type top where there's actually things marked on it. Very similar to playing with a dreidel. And there's a game called Put and Take where there's particular things, and I think I have it listed there, written on each of the sides, and you spin and then you follow the instructions. And I needed to get to some of my friends Bastian and Katie, actually with their daughters, made me a set of Put and Take tea totems for Mid-Realm 50-year celebration. But I need to ask them precisely how they did it. There's also, I want to draw your attention to, I have not figured out how to make these yet, which is why they're not in here. But there is this type of toy that they call like a spinneret or a spinnerelle, where it's got little wings on it and there's something you do to make them spin. And then this boy here is blowing bubbles. So if you want a cheap period toy, make bubble soap and blow bubbles. Bubble battles are great fun. I actually went up to get my grant level Kingdom Service Award soaked from neckline to hem in bubble solution because we had just had a bubble battle with the kids. It was the kids versus the adults. But I guess it was appropriate. But yes, bubbles are period. Blowing soap bubbles is something that you see in a bunch of different illuminations. And now, excuse me, Cat just decided I was boring. So what I want you to look at is, there is a hobby horse, by the way, in here. It also appears that they're pulling this boy on a pillow, which would be a fun game to play that kids make up. But what I want you to see is there are these 2 boys about middle of this image, and you see they have sticks in their hands. And on the end of those sticks, there's crossed wood with little flags. I'll show you a bunch more pictures of this. This is this windmill lance toy that I was talking about. Some of them have 4 spokes. Some of them, like this one, only have a single, so it makes 2 spokes. Theirs are almost always pictured with a hobby horse. And if you make them correctly with a stiff enough piece of paper, when you basically have a dowel rod, and then at the end of that dowel rod, you attach this piece or crossed pieces of wood perpendicular to it, and then you drive a tack through it. And those flags, when you run with this lance, they spin. So you can play like you're jousting. And this is the toy that comes up over and over and over again in Illuminations. So you can see here, there's a boy riding a boar. I do not recommend doing this without your clothes on. Don't try this at home. But you can see he's got one of these little lances. He doesn't blow up quite as well. Again, but you can see here's what you could do with the dowel rod. And then you have this other piece of wood with these stiff little flags and some sort of a tack here. And you can see he's also riding a hobby horse while he's playing with this. This seems to be specifically a toy to pretend that you're a knight on horseback. This little boy has one as well. But the real key to getting it to work is you need something like cardstock. If the paper is too thin, it'll just fold back in the breeze and it won't spin properly. Excuse me. And again, this is the last image that I have in these. But again, you can see here is the boy with his hobby horse. And here you can see it from the front. So you see what it actually looks like if you're looking at it head on. All right. I am going to get out of the screen sharing, but absolutely keep talking. All right.
So what was that little jousting toy called again?
It is called a bunch of different things, which is part of the reason I got out of that.
Okay, sorry.
No, sometimes it's referred to as a windmill. Sometimes it's a scoparel. So SCOPPEREL. They're kind of like a pinwheel, but they're definitely they're clearly everywhere they're pictured being played with. They're a jousting type toy. They're supposed to look like you're jousting. And you can actually if the paper you are using is thick enough, you can dispense entirely with having a wood piece perpendicular. I have actually cut just the windmill shape out of cardstock and just tacked that on the end. And that will still give you that spinning effect with the little flags. Mainly because I didn't need so many heavy hammers around children I didn't know if I just used a tack hammer, which I was just thanked by a parent for. You can get away with a much gentler hammer. And you can't, the other thing is when you hammer in that nail or tack, you can't hammer it in all the way You need to leave a little bit of space so there's room for the movement of that cardstock or paper.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Essentially, you could probably all like pre-drill the perpendicular piece, put a hole in the middle, and have it to where you just want something to keep it from flying off, but it needs to spin around, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. This is the hardest thing to explain in a virtual class. The thing is that when I teach this class in person, I can actually have examples and show you, and it was much more challenging to do that, which is why I decided to give you some more images. And then at the end of the handout, I listed a bunch more basically I said toys you don't even have to make, either because there isn't much to the game, or they're games that are modernly very easy to find.
But do you remember those little pinwheel things? I mean, if you hold them out a window going or on your bike or whatever, they would spin and go real fast.
I do.
But they're sort of similar. I mean, you didn't quite use them in the same fashion, but a bike as opposed to a hobby horse.
Yeah, I think there's a definite line there of connection.
Usually I find out it is. We haven't changed that much.
No, we really haven't. And the number of games that are close to what we played then, rock, paper, scissors is period. It's very obvious. It fits very well. There's a lot of things that fit pretty well. Pull toys. Very true. Not maybe modern plastic, but any of the kites made with a fancier material. Kites are period.
Well, I knew the Viking stuff a little better than I did the more later medieval stuff, and I know that there's a pretty good amount of boats, little wooden boats for stuff like that. And I guess later on you could make parchment boats, but something that you may have to cover it in wax to seal it enough, but you could play with that. Or wooden swords. There's a good amount of wooden swords that go pretty far back.
Yeah, they're wooden swords. The other thing that I want to incorporate as I continue with this class, you mentioned boats, basically vehicles of various kinds, because there are also miniature Roman chariots that they've found, which makes sense. You play what you know, so kids would have played with little mini chariots.
Or
I mean,
a wagon even.
Yeah.
A cart wagon or something like that. That would be familiar to most villagers, I would think.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that go back. But yeah, I mean, games are fun. And, I said I titled it Child's Play and I designed it as a youth and family class. But the truth is, it doesn't really matter how old you are. You can enjoy a lot of these things.
I have to admit, I wanted to make like one of the lances with 2 things and then one with 4 and see what the difference was. But of course, that means I'm out running in the backyard with, looking stupid with the lance.
Look, for those of you who don't know me personally, my most recent famous looking stupid thing was playing tag with the kids at mid-round 50 year and falling and severely spraining my wrist.
Well,
playing tag with the children. And everybody said, why would you do that?
Because it keeps you from being old.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, when we are actually able to be in person again, the next time I do one of these based on Bruegel's children's games, I'll let you know and you can come play and we can try the different kinds of scoparels. Sophia, I see you.
We actually just got a game in the mail today that's a modern game, but I think it's entirely made of components that would have been available in period. And so I'm kind of wanting to medieval MacGyver and see if I can make a version of this. But it comes with all of these little pieces in 3 different sizes. There's a big bag of them. and you load them into this tray. You pull down this spring thing and load them all in there. And then you have to remove them using dexterity and not have it snap at you. And I'm like, I think I could use like an archery bow type thing as a spring part here to load in there. And these are just little cuts off of dowel rod. They're just little round pieces of wood that are painted to make them easier to tell which size you're trying to grab. And it's like 15 points if you pull out one size, 10 for a different, and 5 for another. So it also gets the kids doing some metric math in there too. And I'm like, this will be joining us at the next SCA event that we go to, or meeting, or whatever.
Whatever we're able to get to. Yeah, it's, you got to figure whatever you have, anything you have evidence of, then the kids would, of course, then play with it too and come up with what's their game that they're going to do with it. So it makes sense. One of the ones I didn't mention, but I have in the handout is Pickup Sticks is a medieval game.
Yeah. This is kind of inspired by that, only with like marbly things. And my 4-year-old just put an actual marble in there because when you mentioned marbles earlier, they went for my marble craft supply. They've been playing marbles in the background.
I actually have an incredible collection of things because I've been doing this so long. I didn't include them in here because I couldn't figure out how to make it yourself. Rolling hoops. I found out you can get rolling hoops, like the big ones where you hit it with the stick and try to roll it along, keep the hoops standing up while you roll it. You can get those from, they're changing their name, but it was Plymouth Plantation. You can also get a tabletop size game of wooden ninepence. Colonial Williamsburg and Plymouth Plantation have shipped me several items that have been really fun to play with that look absolutely like they fit in at SCA events. I'm not any good with the rolling hoop, but I'm really excited that I have it. And it was a source of great entertainment.
They played with those into the 18th or 19th century, though, didn't they?
Did, which is why you can get them from the colonial sites in the U.S. Yeah.
Well, I mean, something doesn't last that long if people weren't using it and didn't find enjoyment in it in some way.
Well, and it made sense. It was basically like barrel staves. Yeah, they would come off the barrels. Yeah, so a lot of the toys are very logical in what they are. You are welcome, Antonio. I am always happy to teach fun things. I'm currently the dean of Page School in the Mid-Realm, and I am a big proponent of finding period ways for people to enjoy themselves, because there are a lot of really fun things to do that are medieval. And it's fun to play. Lissa had commented on keeping tops in the basket to keep kids entertained during court or sometimes during what kids consider boring feast entertainment. Yeah, there's all sorts of fun things you can do and find. There's a lot of board games that are dateable to period. Chess, checkers, snakes and ladders. So if people have more questions, please feel free. Oh, yeah, another one. Tiddlywinks. If people have questions, feel free to jump in and ask. We're pretty small. Quick stuff. Took quick snapshots of the glass knuckle bones. Like I said, those are at Johns Hopkins archaeological museum and you can find them. I think that would be fun. I have very nice, realistic looking knuckle bones that are made out of probably a plastic. And then I also have bright blue ones made out of cheap plastic, but I don't lose them very easily.
You can still get the actual sheep ones. I mean, because I
Oh,
know
yeah.
reenactment places that sell them. I don't know that they're any better. And it's kind of a challenge to read, because you feel them and stuff. And there's a thing that's got like 3 pips on it, and this is the 4, and this is the 2, and
Yeah, I'm no good at it, but the second ones, the bright blue ones, I didn't even know were in there. I actually bought like a plastic horseshoe set because I figured that was safer for small people to throw than real iron horseshoes. And they happened to be in the box with it.
I bet they throw differently, don't they? Because the weight's different.
Yeah, the weight is different, but they're actually weighted more than I expected.
Well, like you were talking about the little ball with the tail, those are going to act like the fletchings on an arrow when you throw it, and they're going to help it fly better. Plus, it's like a tail where you've got something to hold and throw with.
Yes, Shazada is disappointed I'm taking the fun out of horseshoes if they're not sufficiently dangerous. That's why she is my apprentice.
It depends on if you've ever been hit in the head with a horseshoe from somebody throwing them.
Or if you're like my nephew and you decide to throw geodes at each other at a household picnic one day. They were 6. They didn't mean to hurt each other.
They never do, but they're going to find a way to do something like that. All kids are kids.
Shazada would like to clarify that she's had a horseshoe hit her head when it's still attached to the horse.
Well, that's worse because the horse can kick harder.
Yes. If anybody else has any questions, feel free. Otherwise, it has, as always, been a pleasure talking to everybody. And probably be seeing more of me.
The only thing that I forgot to say something earlier. If somebody's going to do bone carving, don't cook the bones. Don't use like a roast bone that you've cooked. It won't do right. You have to do it pre-cooking. Don't boil it. Don't put it through the oven cycle and cook it or anything, or it won't work right. It'll be too pulpy.
Yes, my other hint with bones is when Mistress Millicent did a project up here with bones, she actually went to the local butcher, and they were happy to give her bones
because they just throw them away.
What were they going to do with them? And she recreated an entire 10-bead bone paternoster with then a carved memento mori at the bottom out of bone. I have pictures.
I'm thinking femur, like femur
it had to
bones.
Be a big bone.
Yeah, you want something to mess with. It's got enough depth for when you carve detail. It's not going to go all the way to the middle of the bone.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Actually, it's on very, very extended loan to me because I've never gotten it back to her.
And if you're using a Dremel or anything like that, carving, and you're creating lots of dust, wear not just a face mask. I have a breathing setup that you use because you can get white lung disease from that going in. It'll go and sit in your lungs and you can't get it out.
Just remember, everybody, please be safe when you're trying all these things. All right. Oh, Aldi has good foam throwing axes right now for under $15. So while people are seeing their way out, I have to say my very first memory of Duke Valharic was him showing up at a youth point and letting the kids throw. Yeah, it was a throw. They were throwing weapons. They were throwing pool noodles through a hula hoop that he was holding.
And kids will never forget that. If that's their first experience, they'll never forget that.
Well, heck, it was almost 20 years ago, and I
See,
haven't
you've
forgotten
remembered it.
it.
You weren't even throwing the stuff or
No, I
anything.
was just trying to keep them from, murdering the prince at the time. That would have been bad.
Because I know, like, oh, Harvest Days or
Harvest
the
Day.
Barroom Brawl has things
Barroom
where they
Brawl.
have, where you have like a tavern and the kids they always used to do like rolls of toilet paper that they've taped up with duct tape to make like peasant rocks and all that stuff.
Yep.
And the kids love throwing that. It doesn't matter, and it's just for fun. And let them. I don't care. I'm in armor. Well, who cares? They're not going to hurt you.
That is a great time. Yes, somewhere, because there's always somebody who brings stuffed animals so that kids who haven't made anything have things to throw. And there have been some really epic contributions to the Barroom Brawl, like the one year they did it all based on Iron Chef was big, and they had made squid out of foam and duct tape. And the secret ingredient was squid, and that they threw at the fighters. Yeah, so was it last year? I don't even remember what year it is anymore. We did a snowball fight at regular event because there's lots of eliminations of snowball fights. We did it with socks to be donated to the homeless shelter. So everybody got to throw socks.
Well, and then it goes for a good cause too. I mean, yeah, I can really get behind that. That's kids can have fun.
That's
2 years
right.
ago.
That's
2 years ago at the other site.
Yes, the other site. This year they had
The pinata helmet.
the kids made pinata helmet toppers.
No, the adults made those.
Oh, the adults made those?
Yeah, I was Minister of Youth at the time, so they cleared it with me to make sure that I was okay.
So does it sit on top of your helmet like a Taurus would or something?
Yes.
Well, they had a heavy weapons tournament going, and they had these little like ball pinatas on top of their head that they knock off. And I think that was this year. Was that 2000? Was that 2020? Or was that?
Do we even know what year it is anymore?
No.
No. But yes, they made those. My favorite youth tournament with something on your head is the duck on head tournament. They tape rubber ducks to the kids' helms. And the way you win a bout is you have to knock the rubber duck off the other kid's helm. And it's the duck on head tournament. They do it at Valday, in the mid-rom. And yes, the paper mache things on the fighters' heads at regular event, it was like a piñata. There were candy and toys inside. So then they would have to get off the field and the kids would be allowed to go in and collect the toys.
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
And they used to dress up Omerod as the Great Candini at Candlemas. And he would have little things with candy in them on his armor. And when they got hit, the candy would fall out.
I recall him coming out at a tavern brawl dressed as a blonde lady. He put a wig on and he had the braids, and he's coming out. And that's been a long time ago, but that was fun.
There was one year Duke Komar and all of his squires, who many of whom are knights now, they came as the bar band. Remember that one?
I was not there for it, but I have heard the stories.
It was incredible. It was incredible. I mean, there was a bass, there were drums, a guitar where somebody would go around and say kabong. It was funny.
I saw all the pieces the year they did it based on Iron Chef. In addition to the squid, there was a microphone. They had made a fake tuxedo front for Sophia so that she could be the MC, and she was the one with the microphone. And they did this, and they had like a platter with the squid on it, because there's still some squid in Nico and Sophia's garage. Those were based around yeah, not you, Sophia, Nico, Sophia, because they built the squid were built around Nerf footballs.
That's funny.
Anyway, some of you are probably just all enjoying this and laughing because we're now telling crazy stories.
And there's nothing wrong with that either.
No. One of the best things I ever did tournament-wise with kids, we had a very small tournament. We had an event called Three for All, where competitors had to do rattan combat, they had to fence, and I want to say they had to shoot archery. And it was very tiny. We had like less than 15 competitors, and we had a lot of kids because a lot of them were parents. And each of the kids made a favor for a fighter that they chose. And then we borrowed a Polaroid camera. And so each kid gave their fighter the favor, but the kid got a Polaroid picture of themselves posing with their fighter. And some of those fighters wore those favors until they died. Because we had like fabric markers, real simple things, because most of the kids were pretty small. And I think we had it so that every fighter got at least one favor. A couple of them got more than one.
That's cool. That is.
It was fun. All right. It is always fun to hang out. Hi, SCA Grandma.
Hi, baby.
Shizada, whose picture you can see is one of your great-grandchildren.
Oh, boy.
All right, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for coming. I think the next class I'm teaching in January is going to be a discussion of researching the rare, obscure, and taboo. Basically techniques and ideas for researching something that is off the beaten path, that not a lot of other people are into, or might be controversial for some people. So I'm looking forward to seeing people for that.
Okay, we'll see you then. Thanks for teaching,
Yeah.
Elizabeth. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Bye.
Good evening, everybody.